The crisis in Hong Kong has escalated as protesters barricade themselves inside a major university. The pro-democracy movement continues fighting against Beijing's tightening grip on the territory. Protests have crippled Hong Kong for 6 months. Ramy Inocencio was there following the latest.
This was Hong Kong Polytechnic at the start of this week. Police firing nearly 1,500 tear gas canisters. Anti-government protesters responding with firebombs for offense and barricades for defense. This is the university now, a near ghost town with its undefended roadblocks and unlit Molotov cocktails. An SOS call for help made of helmets and towels belies the silence. This man has been cooking for his fellow protesters in the school canteen. Now he's calling on his brothers to leave. The few people left here are now just hiding in this maze of buildings and rooms across campus. With the protest movement now in its 6th month, U.S. university programs in Hong Kong have sent dozens of their students packing.
I think what really scared me was when the protests started reaching university campuses.
19-year-old Anushka Srivastava left on a flight today after her program, linked to the University of Southern California, canceled physical classes for online courses. She says her safety was a growing concern.
There's tear gas right, I think 100 to 200 meters from my dorm. So just, being in that tense environment makes me scared, and that has been affecting my education to some degree as well.
For more of this, I want to bring in CBSN contributor Isaac Stonefish. He's a senior fellow at the Asia Society's Center on U.S.-China Relations. 6 months, Isaac, these pro-democracy protests have been taking place in Hong Kong. Have they been successful?
They've been successful in drawing a lot of attention to the region. I mean, we're talking so much more about Hong Kong than we have. It's certainly a priority for Beijing, but whether or not they're going to lead to more representation for the people of Hong Kong, it's really hard to say. Speaking
of representation, they've got elections in Hong Kong on Sunday. What are you looking for, and why are these elections so important right now?
So these are normally the sort of district level elections about dog walking and very, very local issues. But because these are the first elections that have happened since the protest erupted, people are seeing these as a referendum for the protest. So we're really seeing if the side that is more pro-democracy can really mount a challenge against the more established, wealthier, better-funded pro-Beijing candidates.
President Trump addressed Hong Kong yesterday and on Friday in an interview with Fox and Friends. He weighed in on this right after there was a bipartisan bill. Both houses of Congress, bipartisan, working together, passed this Hong Kong Democracy Act, standing up for these folks in Hong Kong who have been a great deal of violence and attacked. Here's what the president had to say.
And if it weren't for me, Hong Kong would have been obliterated in 14 minutes. He's got 1 million soldiers standing outside of Hong Kong that aren't going in only because I ask him, please don't do that. You'll be making a big mistake. It's going to have a tremendous negative impact on the trade deal. Yeah, look, we have to stand with Hong Kong, but I'm also standing with President Xi. He's a friend of mine. He's an incredible guy. We have to stand, but I'd like to see them work it out.
So the president there saying, look, with the situation in Hong Kong, I intervened. I spoke to the president and said, don't do this, right? Essentially saying, I told them not to do this. How do you think this is going to go down with this? Do you think the president vetoes this because of the trade talks?
I think it's worth stating that most of what the president just said was false. The numbers, the fact that he is the sole person responsible for Xi not going into Hong Kong when actually the domestic situation in China and the situation with Taiwan is far more important. I do think Trump might decide to veto this as a way of saying, hey, I'm still committed to this trade deal. And perhaps
because no matter what, they have seems like so far a veto majority on this, right?
They do. It's almost certain that it will still pass anyway. He could do this and think that the farmers in Iowa are more important to him than people who care about Hong Kong.
And turn to the Chinese and say, look, I tried, but
I did my best. Congress, What are you going to do?
Speaking of trade negotiations, where are we, Isaac, with the trade negotiations with China at this point?
It just seems like a never-ending story.
But yet two of the biggest economies, not insignificant and affecting the lives of many Americans.
Oh, it's massively important. It just feels like at some point we will get a very superficial deal that Trump will say is the biggest trade deal ever, that will just reiterate things that are already happening in the economy, but it's not going to solve the structural issues between the two countries. Xi, the leader of China, and Trump are supposed to meet in Chile that was canceled because of protests in Chile. There's no meeting coming up. It's possible that sometime around the holidays, Trump will say, hey, we have a deal, or it could just be many, many more months. It's hard to know.
Isaac Stonefish, thank you so much for joining us, Isaac.
Thank you.